Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, hit that subscribe button, and thank you so much for my 100 subscribers. You guys are amazing. I can't wait to get 1,000 so I can go live and we can interact and you guys can ask me questions and we can do call-ins and all of that, but that's in the future. We stay humble, and we are doing the last part of Letters from Christopher, you guys. It feels good to be getting this book over with, but we are going to go do some other videos on it. But I just wanted to get these final chapters out of the way. And they're chapters 24 through 28. And it starts off with chapter 24 and with Chris's processing into the jail. Now, remember that infamous mugshot picture without a shirt. And they are looking for injuries or defensive wounds on him. His eyes, his demeanor is chilling to the core. And they take pictures of those lethal weapons, what he calls his hands. He is actually arrested at 11 p.m. Wednesday, August 15th, right before they are finished recovering Shanann's body. The girls had to be recovered the next day, as we went over before. After processing, Chris went straight to the Weld County Jail. We all seen the video right here on YouTube. He is and then right here in the book, it's one of those annoying times that the author just jumps around to something else with absolutely no warning. So then it says, I just want y'all to know that this book is extremely hard to follow unless you're absolutely obsessed with the case. If you're like some of us that are obsessed with the case, then you completely understand what she's saying. But if you're new to the case, it would be really hard to follow this book. And we all are only obsessed with this case because we want the truth. I feel like we're obsessed with the truth. And that's not unhealthy, right? So the author jumps from August 15th processing to something that happened in September. She states that between the time of his arrest and up into his sentencing, that dark things were happening at the Watts home that would make any person freeze in their steps. The author calls it evil presented in different forms. And she says that one evening, not long after the killing, the police received a 911 call stating that a woman was walking around in the garage. There are videos on YouTube that show 4 officers arriving at the home. They clearly saw the garage lights on. Yet when police made entry, it was stone cold, chilled darkness. Cops went inside yelling, as they are supposed to do when they entered the home, "Make yourself known." Then they said that several times with no answer. And then they entered the garage with their guns drawn, yelling the same thing again, but then the lights were off. Officers saw there is no way out the garage without opening the garage door or coming through the house right past them. You can tell from the video that the police were shook too. They wondered themselves who turned them on and who turned them off. The author then goes into what she calls another evening. Now remember that, what she calls another evening. At 9:05 p.m., the cops were dispatched by the neighbors, seeing an unknown person walking up to the house. Once on the scene, cops watched the neighbors' camera footage showing a large black vehicle pulling up to the house with an unknown female getting out of the SUV and walking up towards the house. But police say, according to this book, that the footage never shows her leave. And once again, the garage lights came back on that were off beforehand. Officers searched and find no one and shut off all the lights and locked the doors behind them. Again, this is all Cato's recount of the events. That keep that in mind. On September 21st, 2018, a message was left with the police from an unknown person saying that her deceased daughter's back door was left open at the Saratoga house, and this being the Watts house. The police came, they looked around, they found no forced entry, and it was all locked up. But that same night at 8:50, another call came in to the police department stating that the lights again had been on and that they had been on earlier. Multiple officers came and searched the home again to see that the lights were on. So officers went around turning them off and left, locking all the doors behind them. The author then goes into, was it supernatural? And how research shows that demons will play with the lights and things that you plug in. Now that is her version. Yet the discovery tells us that all these things happened in one night. If you are obsessed like me and a lot of you guys that are commenting, you've read the discovery report. And the discovery report goes differently than what Cadel has explained in this book. And I just want you guys to know what the discovery says and let you compare it to what Cadel just said. This is what the discovery says. On Friday, September 21st, 2018, officers reported to 2825 Saratoga Trail for a report of suspicious activity. Dispatch was advised that reported party got a text message from an unknown person that her deceased daughter's back door was open at her house. This is the home of Shanann Watts. The officer also typed that she walked the perimeter of the home and there were no signs of forced entry to the home, and that call had come in at 6:32 p.m. Well, later on that night at approximately 7:50 p.m., she again responded to the residents to assist Sergeant Manley. After arrival of several officers, we performed a search of the inside of the home. We received info that the lights that were on in the home had not been on prior to this evening. Also, a neighbor had video footage that showed an unknown female walking up to the front door of the house, but not leaving. The house was clear, and all the lights were turned off, and doors and windows locked when we exited Frederick Police Department. The officer also stated in discovery that when she walked the perimeter, she saw the screen in the back was slid open. But the actual door was shut and locked with the security bar down. Here is the chilling part. As the two officers are leaving the back of the house to get to the front, they notice that the garage lights are on, and they feel certain they were not before when they arrived, nor when they walked to the back to check the back door. Now, this is in the discovery, not the book. They note that it's odd, and they leave the residence. Later, again, they have to go back out there because Frank says that he spoke to the neighbor Nate, and he says garage lights are still on. Police find that odd. Never before this day have the garage lights came on, or in days leading up to this, period. Just that day. When officers arrive again, this is when Nate shows them the video of the female walking up to the front door of the house. She is never seen leaving the house, and shortly after this female gets there, a black SUV is seen slowly driving down the street. You cannot see if the woman came from the vehicle because you don't see anyone exiting it or entering it. This creeps officers out enough to call for backup, so 4 or 5 officers come out and enter. Their guns are drawn, and when clearing the house, there is a video of this on YouTube if you want to go find it. The author then jumps back to his family, not being able to see or talk to Chris until the day before the sentencing. The attorneys did arrange a meeting with Chris and his family. They did fly them out to Colorado before the sentencing. At this point is where they supposedly learn he has pled guilty to the annihilation of his entire family. They feel like his guilty plea was not forced, but attorneys suggested it to him to save him from the death penalty. The author Oh, of course he jumped on it to save himself. The author says, quote, "This did not sit well with Chris or his family that he had pled guilty. His family, because they went into sentencing not having been given any details, just that he confessed to save his life. For Chris, he just had a hard time with it, period, but he did not want to be put to death. Because he did not want to be put to death. Chris at this point only tells his family he is doing it for a reason, but nothing more was told to them." The author says Sandy is the one that stopped the death penalty because the DA Rourke wanted it badly. So which is it? Chris, did he accept the plea deal that he was given? Or is it because Sandy stopped him from getting the death penalty that the DA wanted him to have? Or is it a little bit of both? And this is where the author compliments Sandy and says that she should be commended for it. Okay, Captain Obvious. That is just a given. She also writes that Chris said, I shouldn't have said that. That's not nice. She also writes that Chris said, even if it had not all come out like it did, Chris planned on pleading guilty anyway. He tries to blame anger and memory loss for the lack of reporting it. And once he had gotten past all of it, that he had planned on confessing. Okay. I might have believed that lie had he not admitted to planning the murder since July 14th. I personally think that during that month that Chris became obsessed with the murders. Literally. And so he had an entire month to get super dark. Anyone would that is obsessing over killing. So do we believe what the author told us? That without the outstanding evidence, he planned to confess? Put your comment below. He says since he could not remember everything about the murders, and at the time he did not feel remorse, but had to pretend like he did, that itself was really hard for him. He says a lot of how he doesn't like to be hated. Remember when he apologizes in his first confession after failing the polygraph? He apologized to the agents for lying to them. Yet there were lies in his second interrogation too. So he wasn't really sorry or he wouldn't have lied again the second time. And we would be fools to think he's not lying now. We also see this by the Oxy story he gave the author and the audio he gave his family that was just released. You can see it on another YouTube channel saying that the Oxy came from the bin in the basement. He strangely tells the author in the book that after he tells his attorneys what he could remember of the night, that they were willing to spin it in whatever way Chris wanted them to. He said his lawyer and him went through very stressful and heated times leading up to the plea deal, going over the case and his options. He also said during this time he felt angry, defiant, and heartless, all until October 1st when this supposed change occurred in him when he had his come to Jesus moment in his cell that night. I thought it was interesting that she titled a whole chapter to the family, and that is the next chapter, chapter 25, but no mention of the Ruseks. She opens up with talking about the Watts and what they went through, leading up to sentencing and after his arrest. She says when Cindy went to see him, she asked if he was sure about his plea deal. Cindy said his attorneys got loud with her and said, "Stop asking those questions or we will shut this bleat down right now," which confused the Watts more since no one bothered to fill them in. The author says that coming to terms with the fact that their son had put their grandbabies in those hatches was more than they could handle. Most of their confusion was because of Chris's first confession, where we all know he accuses Shanann falsely. The next chapter is called Sentencing, but it's never even mentioned. But what we do know about it is as follows. We know that there was a line from the courtroom through the courthouse and all the way outside, hundreds of people trying to get in. The seats were filled with reporters. so not many bystanders made it in the courtroom. The only room left to sit was on the Watts side, since Shanann's side was full. There was also an overflow courtroom with audio only and no TVs. Chris was calm and subdued and kept his head down when walking in. He did kind of look a little pissed. The DA captured the audience with his bone-chilling opening statements. When he told the court Bella fought back, there was a huge gasp from the crowd. This was the first time the families had been told about Bella's violent death until that day. From other YouTubers I have watched that actually went, they said that the whole courtroom started sobbing. Remember those impact statements? How gut-wrenching they were to hear? How hard must they have been to read or write? They all had this devastation in common, no matter what side you were on. There was a press conference after, across the street, with Nicole Atkinson and Shanann's family that most of us have seen on YouTube too. The next chapter is chapter 26, and it's about Chris's incarceration. Chris talks about that night after sentencing. He goes back to Weld County, where he had been 7.5 weeks. He said other inmates screamed at him and told him ways to kill himself. It was almost constant until they lost interest or saw it wasn't upsetting him. The author states that had they been able to get to him, they would have killed him. He talks about being on suicide watch and being deprived of everything, no pillow, no blanket, and a paper gown and a small pad on the floor. He says at this point he was in a so-called state of trauma and nothing made sense to him. All of a sudden, Chris was transferred to Wisconsin. He does say he was scared that he might go to a certain prison, but he does not give the name of it. Coward. Speculation is, and I also believe, that he would not give the name of the prison because it's a supermax in Florence, Colorado that actually houses El Chapo and a lot of terrorists. So I'm almost positive that is where he didn't want to say. I think that's why he did not tell, because even he knows he could get sent there as justice. And even he knows subconsciously that he deserves to be there. He talks about craving ice cream and pizza and that the food is okay. And has the nerve to say he craves Shanann's spaghetti. Well, her spaghetti sauce, and that she was an amazing cook. There are 17 men in his pod now. While she is writing this book, there were 17 men in his pod, and he says that they all are handicapped. He says he won't talk to anyone in there about his crimes. He says he only talks to his sister, a friend, and now this Cato lady about his crimes. He says Jake Patterson is housed in the cell right next to him, and he is the one who kidnapped Jamie Klaus and murdered her parents. Chris wants to cross paths with him one day, and thinks since Jake is 21, he has a lot of time to think about what he has done, and he thinks about counseling him. Chris says he is locked down alone in his cell for most of the day, but has rec time for 40 minutes, and loves basketball and sunshine and the fresh air when it's nice out. He reads and writes a lot. He receives bukus of mail and throws most of it away. But then he, in turn, right after that says, but a lot he does answer. So if he throws most of it away and a lot he answers, I don't know if that makes sense. I think that contradicts itself. So which is it, Chris? He says, one of the hardest things is no privacy. This is when the author goes into all the things Chris will never be able to do again, like going out to social functions. She says he also misses washing his car, mowing the lawn, feeling the rain and snow on his face. If the weather is bad, his 40-minute rec time is inside. So this gives me a little comfort. This is me talking, not the author. This gives me a little comfort that something is stolen from Chris since he stole lives. Holidays, which means that he'll never feel rain or snow on his face, because if the weather's bad, he doesn't get to go outside for his 40-minute rec time. He's stuck inside. So never again will he feel rain or snow, I hope. Holidays are not recognized at the prison, so only the real meaning of Christmas can be celebrated by Chris on December 25th. No celebration or presents ever again for him. The author says in the book he will never have love again, but in her interviews just recently, these past few nights, she clearly said he has a girlfriend who comes to Chris's defense like she is his wife. The book never mentions her. She says Ronnie Watts did not get to visit Chris for the first time until June 2nd of 2019, this year. Ronnie had meetings in Chicago, and his boss instructed him to take advantage and go see his son. They both were elated, the author says. They spent a very emotional 3 hours together in a face-to-face meeting. They held it together during that meeting, but Ronnie admits to breaking down and losing it as soon as he walked out the building. Never had he imagined this ever, where he would have to come see his son here that he had raised. On June 25th, 2019, lawyers got Chris to sign everything over in probate court, or he did this voluntarily. And supposedly, according to the book, Shanann's father thanked Chris, and Chris said, "You're welcome, love you guys." And Frank allegedly responded back, "Love you." At the end of chapter 26, she says Ronnie and Cindy finally got Chris's wallet he had on him the night of the arrest. He had $13 in it. The author asks, is this a coincidence? If she's referencing the $13 to the date that Shanann died, I don't really think that's much of a, but if you guys do, let me know down below. Chapter 27 is titled True and Final Confessions and His Testimony. Now, I have already read the confession letter in an earlier video. You guys can go and watch that. She states his testimony was promised to be told for him in his words exactly. So, the first letter in the book is to Frank, Sandy, Frank Jr., and starts as follows. I'm sorry for the pain and utter anguish I have caused your family. This is a travesty that I never thought would occur. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico are 4 beautiful souls that will live on forever in heaven and in our hearts. I know you must hate me for what I have done, and honestly, I would be surprised if you didn't. This is a moment in my life that I will never be able to undo, and it rips me apart every single day. I see their beautiful faces and beautiful smiles everywhere I look. When I read to them at night, I can feel them snuggled up next to me like we are at home. I want you to know I still consider you my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and brother-in-law, and that I will love you yesterday, today, and forever. I pray that, 1, you can have forgiveness for me, but most of all, I pray you can have compassion on my family. They are hurting so bad from all this, and I know they would love to reconcile if that is something you would allow to happen. I pray every day that both families can meet at the gravesite, hold hands, pray, and talk about the great times. Share about birthdays and visits and funny FaceTime conversations. I know this prayer hasn't been answered yet, but I know God is working this request of mine in your hearts. And I feel like he's manipulating them, knowing that they are so close to God and knowing that they didn't want to kill him with the death penalty. And so writing this letter to them, he's like manipulating them to feel sorry for him in some way. So I don't know, or to have a relationship with him. And then the letter continues on, and he says in his letter, forgiveness is the start of healing. And I pray you can start that process with my family. Love, Chris. The author admits she is holding back a chapter about Nicole Kessinger during an interview that she's done the last few days. Look it up on YouTube, okay? And basically, she is going on Dr. Oz on November 5th. And I think... I think it's November 5th. Don't quote me to that. So maybe we'll find out more about that chapter that she's holding back about Nicole Kessinger on Dr. Oz. Or maybe we'll find out when she's doing these interviews with other people on YouTube. But I really, really want to know, why would she hold that chapter back? It's a whole chapter on Nicole. It's what we all wanted. Maybe she's holding it back to get a new book, to hold on to us, because she knows that the writing of this book is it's poorly written. There's a lot of errors, and it jumps around like crazy, and it's really hard to follow. So I don't know what her reasoning keeping that chapter back, but when I found that out, I was like, what? So I guess we will find out. If you guys want to comment down below and tell me what her reasoning is for holding it back. I also want to know what you guys think about the Metallica song. Do you think Nikki was the one that sent the lyrics to Chris, or do you think Chris looked the lyrics up right after the murders? I mean, it's another lie from Chris that we don't know what to believe. Chris tells the author about things he had not said about Nicole Kessinger. He states he cannot remember what he has or hasn't said about her, but he goes into her small group of friends that she did not tell him about. They were dark and did some dark things. She eventually did tell him about them. No, she evidently did not. She evidently did not tell him about them until the end. I am so sorry. I'm almost done and I mess up at the very end. She evidently did not tell him about them until the very end. She had removed most of her social media because of a past abusive relationship. He said that she took meds, but he did not know why. He brings up the July 4th and the July 14th incidents again that we already covered. He also talks about his first night in NC when Nikki is texting him, insisting that she gets more time, no matter what. He brings up the Oxy and why he researched it. He says that he was wanting to cause her a miscarriage, but we already knew that from before. And that according to what he read, he thought that it would make her have a miscarriage, and it didn't work. And then chapter 28 is letters to Chris, to his family for like their birthdays and stuff. But the end is a foreword from Chris, written by Chris, explaining his salvation. He says he trusts in Christ and temptation stole his life away. He says darkness made him restrained from making the decisions he should have. He says it robbed him of everything he loved. He says darkness can blind you from everything you hold dear. He says it can destroy your soul, but the light can help you restore it. That light is peace in your heart. That light is the smiles and laughs that you go home to every day. And that light is the love of God and His Son. A love that stretches from the east to the west. And again, I want to say thank you so much for my subscribers. You guys are awesome. Tell me what you think down below about some of the things I've talked to you about. Also, I am going to do a lot more videos on this. We're going to go over some other details that I have highlighted in the book. So I will make a whole video about things I highlighted in the book that I thought that you guys should know. So thank you so much for watching my videos and stay tuned. I do appreciate all the support. Bye.